Today we'll continue our look through the Smithsonian Book of Comic Strips with strips 15 through 18. We will look at Nibsy the Newsboy from 1906 and The Kinder Kids also from 1906. But first, the next page of the Encyclopedia of Comics, we have an example of Little Jimmy from 1905. Here we see an April Fool's trick where father is trying on the wrong pair of shoes, so he sends his boy to the store to get the right pair, and the boy comes across some other children who are playing April Fool's jokes. They play it on an old man, and then the father falls for the same joke, and he spanks the boy. Sort of the same punchline that we have with the Katzenjammer kids. Now this is interesting. Winsor McCay, whom we've seen before with Little Nemo, dream of the Rarebit Fiend, 1905. So that would be right before the strips that we see in the oversized calendar. In this example, we have an old man who wants to turn up the furnace, and the furnace's face transforms in sort of a kind of a demon face, and it sort of comes alive and chases him to the rooftop. Now, once again, with McKay, the dialogue is fairly superfluous. I wish there were more, we see a lot of things. We don't need to be told a lot of them. But, these are the early years of this medium. Hairbreadth Harry, 1906, the very first episode of the strip. This is one of the progenitors of the daily strip. And here we have a combination of dialogue in the balloons, and then we also have narration. So it took some while to work out the logistics of how to do this. Now keep in mind, in 1906, film was in a very nascent form, so the cameras didn't really move, and so when we look at comic strips and we see different camera angles, we see that they are anticipating some of the things that we will later see in early films. Alright, tomorrow we will look at a different Little Nemo, but let's go ahead and turn to Nibsy the Newsboy. Now, I don't know a lot about this strip, but one thing that we can observe is that, once again, we have this header, which is sort of our introduction, which is unique for this strip, although I'm sure this was a sticker of some sort. Now, we note we don't have the 12-panel format that we've seen in some earlier strips. There's a little bit of variation. In terms of the plot, Newsboy is visiting the King of Fairyland. Now, once again, this is a common motif that we've seen in these early strips. Buster Brown with his magical journeys, Little Nemo with his magical journeys, and here he is literally going to Fairyland as opposed to dreaming of going to Fairyland. In this case, it is with some fairy dust. So, the theme of the boy and his magical world we will see carried on with Barnaby, with Charlie Brown, and with Calvin and Hobbes. Anyway, I really don't know a lot about this strip, but I do think this has some interesting composition, and I like how sort of the creatures in the fairy dust have a different look because they are outlined in different color than the rest. Now, the Kinder Kids, which are also from 1906, I think this is a very distinct and very interesting art style. You'll notice at once that he is not afraid to use shapes that are not rectangles or squares. This is an octagon. The dialogue is very difficult to read. Sometimes it's slanted and sometimes it's just small. Of course, the original pages were much larger. But once again, this is what I think of as the Finding Wally format, where we have lots of stories just sort of happening all at once. So in this case, the story, as far as I can tell, is some children are having an adventure, and they are leaving home. So the Statue of Liberty is waving goodbye, and we have ships filled with interesting characters bidding farewell. Now in this strip, not only are children having adventures, but we have a magical talking dog, who we will see later on. So, just like Tige and Buster Brown, talks, and just like Snoopy talks, or at least Charlie Brown can understand him in some fashion, and Hobbs can talk, well, they were doing that all the way in 1906. Now, this is interesting because this has only 4 panels and an introduction, and look at this. So, he very easily just could have done 4 squares, but instead there's a little bit of decoration around them. This is something we'll notice later on with Carl Barks, when he did sort of decorations and unusual embellishments with his Donald Duck comics later on in the 1950s. So that's the thing with comics. Everything is old, everything is new, everything comes back. So in this case, they are having an adventure like Odysseus, with sort of a storm cyclone. And one thing that they have here is there's a giant who lives on a cloud, private cloud, keep out, and the giant shoots the cyclone. And then here we have the adult characters, I'm guessing they are the villains, who are still chasing these children. So I guess these villains have been chasing these children all over the world. And here you'll see that animals do talk in this world. It's just a magical world. I don't know how else to say it. I do like these little hints of geography here. I mean, this looks like a very European city. And you'll notice how, once again, he could have just drawn a square, but instead we have an octagon here. So we have, and notice the pattern there, octagon, octagon, square, square. So it just makes the arrangement very unique, very interesting. And this type of adventure is just very reminiscent of Calvin and Hobbes in many ways. It's everything old is new again. Alright, tomorrow we will look at the Newlyweds and Mr. Tweediddle as we continue to explore the history of comics. And I'll talk to you next time. Goodbye.